Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Mike Mallorat, the Technical Director for Federal at Veritas. And Mike, thanks again for taking the time to speak with me. There's plenty to dive into here, and I think a good place to get started would just be looking at really cloud and the intersection of what we've been going through for the past 18 months now. Cloud has, of course, been a driving force in digital transformation efforts across the federal government. But of course, we're at a situation now where the demand and the ability of what agencies are able to supply are kind of at a mismatch right now. And so I think that's a great jumping off point. How do you think agencies can close this gap between, again, the demand for these cloud services and what agencies are able to get online in real time?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few things that can be done, right? Certainly, one of the things that we see is there tends to be a little bit of a disconnect in the planning capabilities of the agencies for being able to understand what they have on premise, what and when to move certain applications to the cloud, what the impact of that is going to be if they do that from a cost perspective. We look at how infrastructure analytics can actually provide that kind of holistic view of both the on-premise environment, the cloud environment, actually put in their specific cloud pricing model that they would have based upon their ELA that they've provided with the cloud provider, and understand what something's going to cost before they move it up there. Therefore, they can make some informed decisions as well. In addition to that, we have several customers who are looking to do cloud from a DR strategy, as where they would keep things on premise and do DR to the cloud. Veritas is very well positioned in order to be able to set up a DR with continuous data protection for a very low RPO RTO for being able to recover into the cloud, as well as be able to make sure that they have a just-in-time infrastructure, which is even more important because the concept of being able to have a DR site that is not actually actively running is very cost-effective compared to a environment that has to be physically stood up and running all the time. So we see a lot of benefits for what customers are doing there too as well. The other thing that we're seeing is there can be a lot of challenges with being able to report on the infrastructure after it's been moved into a hybrid environment. And what customers are looking for is being able to understand better what their cloud applications are costing them. If they keep everything that is solely based upon cloud services that are available to them, billed and metered through the cloud, they can certainly get a pretty good accounting of what things cost. When you start having to bring in third-party products into the cloud that you may actually have separate licensing for, but you're going to use the infrastructure as a service capability of clouds in order to be able to run those applications, it becomes much more beneficial for them to be able to have a reporting and accounting mechanism that allows them to be able to understand what that cost model is based upon what they've brought to the table, as well as what they're consuming through the cloud. And that's one of the other areas that our infrastructure analytics actually plays a very strong part.
Awesome. Great way to frame the rest of the conversation here. Changing gears here a little bit, software as a service, SaaS-based applications are becoming more and more commonplace for civilian agencies. If the application data is already in the cloud, why would an agency need another backup solution?
Great question. I think when we consider software as a service, we automatically think that whoever that service provider is actually guaranteeing the integrity of the data, protecting the data, and will always have the data available to us, right? But I think that starts to be the wrong way to look at it. Even if they're providing backup services in addition to their offering, that's going to come to them at an additional cost. But ultimately, when we look at the fine print, whether it be the cloud provider itself who's providing anything, the data is always the responsibility of the customer. It is never the responsibility of the cloud. It's all part of the cloud shared responsibility model. When you look at software as a service, the data is still the responsibility of the customer. It is not the responsibility of the cloud provider or of the SaaS provider. So I think it's really important that customers take that approach and understand that. And then the cloud is not immune from attacks the same way that on-premise would be. If the cloud becomes unusable, and we have seen where entire portions of clouds or entire clouds have gone down for extended periods of time, where, somebody may need to be able to recover somewhere else. It may not be the best strategy to keep everything within the one environment. Also, you think about some of the SaaS companies, there are SaaS companies that come and go. There are people who have decided to actually be able to put software capabilities into the government space and then decided to get out of that space, right? And then what do you do when you don't have your data back? So it's really important for customers to make sure that they do put in a strategy that is effective for them to make sure that they have ownership of their data, as well as can guarantee the integrity of it, regardless of what changes happen within the world.
All important points to consider there. And certainly, what critical features should agencies look for in a backup and an archive solution when it comes to the cloud?
That is another great question that I think can be addressed in many different ways, right? When we think about what the cloud has available to it, you can have multiple copies of your application in a single region. You can actually have redundancy from region to region, right? The cloud providers often offer some level of backup capability, but typically those become snapshots that exist on the same type of volumes or the exact same volumes that their production data is running on. So again, we have to consider what could go wrong and whether or not that capability that the cloud provider is actually offering up to you is going to be able to meet the needs of any kind of real disaster that comes into place. And in most cases, we have seen that it has not, where customers have actually lost data within cloud providers, unless they had an external capability to make sure that they could restore that data. So you need to also be able to make sure that you can back up more than just the VMs, right? Your backup application that you choose to use to protect your information in the cloud should be able to run in containers. It should not be something that has to be able to run continuously and always be on, because that drives up the cost of your backup infrastructure. Your backup software should be able to protect containers, whether they be persistent or non-persistent containers, right? Persistent containers store actual data that evolves over time. Non-persistent containers are used to actually build the environment. Your backup software should be able to reassemble an application if there was the event of a disaster, right? Reassemble it based upon all of the containers. So it should have that capability as well. It should be able to support being able to make that application mobile from perhaps one cloud provider to the next, right? That is something that Veritas has on the very short-term roadmap. The other items are already available to all of our customers today. And then, this other thing about being able to maintain additional copies offsite in a deduplicated format, right? The real important characteristic of clouds that we see is egress fees tend to be very expensive. So if you can transmit data where it's just a fraction, say 2 to 10% of the actual data that's actually being stored, you can do things much more cost effective and efficiently. And then when we think about the archive aspect, right? Veritas is one of the industry leaders in the archiving business. We have a product within our portfolio called MergeOne, which can actually get data from over 100 different sources, including all of the major SaaS-based applications, which can allow customers to archive their data off from SaaS-based applications too as well. And then we offer being able to build an archive into another cloud if need be necessary as well, that allows them to make sure that they ship it off to another environment to ensure that they have long-term integrity of it, or ship it back on premise.
Great. Well, Mike, again, drilling down here on the security piece of things, what is Veritas doing to meet the data protection needs of the federal government right now in light of an increasingly complex and prevalent threat landscape?
Yeah, I think, Veritas has done a lot of things over the past several years, right? And let's start with what we've done from a corporate perspective and how we're actually supporting the government customers. A couple of years ago, when the Department of Defense announced its intentions to come out with the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program, Veritas actually set out to formalize its US-based support that we already had for customers, but we formalized it into a guaranteed situation so that our customers could gain access to support 24/7, 365. Veritas is also going down the route of pursuing a CMMC certification that will be consistent with the type of information that we store within our systems from customers, right? Sometimes we get log information, et cetera, which has very moderate confidential information about government systems that needs to be protected properly under CUI. In addition to that, we've looked at, the latest executive order from the Biden administration back in May 12th, right? Which is about the IT security information. And we're staying on track to make sure that Veritas continues to meet with all of those requirements. We also know that, perhaps our single biggest product that we have in our portfolio is NetBackup, and how backup and recovery has actually been deemed as critical software under the latest definition by NIST of what critical software is. So that's going to put some additional requirements on us. We're definitely looking to track and make sure we're meeting those requirements for our government customers as that becomes more operationalized and mandated now that it's been defined. When we think about some of the things that I talked about in the previous question around the containerization, we started containerizing the NetBackup application several years ago when we started introducing our Flex hardware. And our Flex appliance is for being able to provide backup capabilities as well as storing backup images. Have been highly successful for Veritas. In January of this year, we released what we call our Flex Scale appliance, which is a scale out type solution that includes our Flex software on top of it. So we're still running those applications within containers. What that does is it increases the capability of the customers to be able to update their environments very, very rapidly. What we'll see with the Flex Scale in the future is to be able to run that in a cloud reference architecture, so that allows them to be able to back up within a cloud infrastructure and still take advantage of the key capabilities that Veritas has. When we look at what we've done from a ransomware protection, we've introduced the concept of worm-based storage for your backup images, which is a rather challenging concept because backup images are being appended and changed all the time, and you're using duplicated information. But we've been able to conquer that, and we do have that capability today within our portfolio. We have also, for quite some time, made sure that only certain processes can actually write to the volumes that exist within any of our storage infrastructure capabilities. By limiting what computer-based processes actually have access to those volumes, we reduce some of the attack vectors automatically for that. We've built in anomaly detection into our data protection capabilities, which ensures that it can help identify if ransomware does get into the backup stream. And then we also have built in machine analytics and machine learning capabilities to be able to make sure that we know if somebody does get attacked by a ransomware, that they can actually validate at what point in time they need to go back to recover to make sure they recover without the ransomware in their environment. So, and then we're also building practices and services around large scale recovery. So if somebody has to do a multi-petabyte environment, we'll have the services teams available to be able to bring them up in a hurry. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing today.
All right. Yeah, a lot of irons in the fire there, certainly. And Mike, we're drawing close to time here, but are there any closing thoughts, any closing sentiments you'd like to leave us with before we wrap things up here?
Yeah, so very recently, Gartner released their Magic Quadrant on the enterprise data protection platforms. Veritas has been once again named a leader in that Magic Quadrant. And they have been a leader for, I think, the past 15 or 16 years, somewhere in that category, pretty much ever since the inception of Gartner releasing that particular Magic Quadrant. So we continue to make sure that we're evolving our applications to meet the demands of the newer workloads that are out there, as well as meet the demands of the newer environments where those workloads operate, and certainly continue to improve our capabilities while maintaining our ability to support legacy customers. One of the things we see in a lot of customers' environments is they are often looking for a desire to standardize onto a single backup solution. NetBackup is the solution that actually has the capability of being able to support almost any customer's entire environment, which very few can even come close to being able to say that.
All right. Well, a lot of food for thought there, but that's all the time that we have for right now. I'd like to thank today's guest, Mike Mallarat, the technical director for Federal at Veritas. I'm your moderator, Jory Heckman, and you're listening to Federal News Network. Now, let me send you back to the studio for more on the Cloud Exchange.